Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to take part in this debate. How do we, as so many colleagues, certainly on this side of the House, have asked this afternoon, how do we persuade an employer? How do we create the incentives for an employer to take a chance on a young person who may have no work experience? They may be full of ambition, fresh ideas, curiosity, but with little or no experience to offer. When that same employer could choose an older candidate who's proven, reliable, familiar with the workplace. And if we can answer that question, Madam Deputy Speaker, then we'll help more than one person. We help ensure that the door to opportunity for people to have that dignity of work that my honourable friend has just talked about, to be provided. In 21 years, nearly 21 years, as a Member of Parliament now, with the Honourable Lady, the Minister, she, like me, will have visited hundreds of schools and asked thousands of students. I've certainly done so from Holderness Academy to Withensea High School, the same question. What do you want to be when you leave school? But not once, Madam Deputy Speaker, has a child replied unemployed. And for good reason. Young people are ambitious. They want the dignity of work that my honourable friend spoke about so passionately just now, over the indignity of welfare. They want to climb a ladder of opportunity. They want not fall into the trap of dependency. And yet, and the Minister reflected this in her remarks, study after study tells us the same hard truth. Young people who experience long-term unemployment are more likely to end up poor, sick, and more isolated than their peers. No options, no hope. No way should we be consigning our young people to that fate. But Labour governments have done this before. And some of the contributions, I never want to question anyone's honesty, but to be so selective in this data, to talk about the 14 years so relentlessly and then not give youth unemployment figures for the 14 years. Not a single member opposite. They've picked some 3-year period around COVID, which surely anyone fair-minded, I mean, the honourable gentleman back there, I thought he made a fair point, a fair statistical point. He said, OK, it's gone up under Labour, which he conceded. How refreshing. But he said it was going up when we came to power and that we should deal with it. That was a fair point, a point well made. But in 1997, youth unemployment stood at 14%. By 2010, it had climbed under the Socialist Party opposite to 20%. By 2024, I'll make a little more progress and then I'll happily give way, having referenced the honourable gentleman, the very least I can do. By 2024, it had been brought back to below 14%. So, again and again, Conservatives have brought youth unemployment down, and I've just touched on, others have touched on, the Minister's touched on, just how damaging it is for young people to be unemployed, how it has not just a short-term horrific impact, it has a lifelong impact. I don't quite know why that is the case, but data, study after study shows that it is. And now, less than 2 years in, the number is at 16% and rising. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, we've seen this film before. And unless the government changes course, we know how it ends. So how do we change course? And I think colleagues on this side of the House have tried to indicate to colleagues opposite what it might be. And I know that they do lack experience of running businesses. So few of them have ever actually had to make that huge decision, that risk-filled decision of employing someone, of employing more people, of having to find the money to pay them at the end of the month, as well as pay all the taxes. But you do it by changing incentives, as any good economist knows. The single biggest cost for almost any business is its workforce. Yet this Chancellor has chosen to increase the minimum wage and so many other costs on business. In turn, the cost of employing 18 to 20-year-olds has risen not by £2,000, this just since July 2024, not by £3,000, Madam Deputy Speaker, but a staggering £4,095 in less than 2 years. So if we understand that behaviour is driven by incentives and you make it much more expensive to employ a young person compared to someone who's older, what happens? Well, it's not a surprise. The rate of youth unemployment has gone up. And, let me give way to the honourable gentleman.
I do thank him for giving way, and I do thank him for reflecting on longer than just the last few years. But if he's been in this place for 21 years, he'll remember you referred to 2010. It wasn't because we had a socialist government in 2010, although I'm a big fan of Gordon Brown. It's because we had a global financial crisis. And unemployment was high in the UK, but it was high elsewhere as well. But he will remember that part of his government's response to that was austerity. And does he want to reflect on the impact of that on our young people?
The honourable gentleman makes a very fair and reasonable point. The point to reflect on, though, is if he goes back and looks through the data of that last quasi-socialist government, youth unemployment stayed stubbornly high throughout. And actually, it wasn't just the 2008 crash. The truth was, throughout that period, we had a much higher level of youth unemployment than we should have done. And of course, of this austerity, the government overspent. We inherited that massive deficit and we slowly brought it down through the 2010s, but we overspent each and every year. So this myth of austerity, if that means living within your means, well, we didn't live within our means. We overspent each and every year, but by the time we got to COVID, we'd managed to get that right down because we show fiscal responsibility, because we know that if you spend money you don't generate today, you impose the burden on the very young people we're now imposing unemployment upon. So just to deal with the minimum wage, and members opposite touched on it, or do we want to face young people and say they're not worth these higher pay? Well, if they don't have the experience and if they lose out on getting a job in the first place against an older person because they haven't got even cost competitiveness to use it, they are in trouble. So since its introduction in 1998, there has been a development rate, a lower wage for younger workers. Deliberate. It's for a very sensible reason. When young people enter the workplace, they're doing exactly that. They're developing skills, confidence, discipline, and the ability to work productively alongside more experienced colleagues. And employers were explicitly permitted to pay less in order to reflect an economic reality. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't doubt the good intentions of the party opposite of its cabinet, and indeed of the honourable lady who I may let come in and intervene on me in a moment. But good intentions don't disguise the truth, because they haven't run businesses, and it shows. They don't understand how employers make decisions on how behaviour is incentivised. By abolishing the development rate, the Chancellor wanted to signal that she's on the side of young people. Well, put us in a political divide. You Tories, you don't want to pay young people a fair and decent wage. Well, of course we do, but we want them to have a job. The insider-outsider issue that my right honourable friend touched on earlier. The effect that the Chancellor has had is the opposite of that which she's desired. She's not helping young people. Many have received a short-term pay rise, but hundreds of thousands have received the ultimate kick in the teeth. Not a pay cut, Madam Deputy Speaker, but no pay at all, because the job they should have been offered has disappeared in a puff of the Chancellor's smoke. After the first budget, a survey by the Beverley Chamber of Trade found that 88% of their members said they would be less likely to employ young people because of the rise in the minimum wage. Despite that warning, the Chancellor returned with a second budget and destroyed even more opportunities with another £26 billion tax raid. Madam Deputy Speaker, we can but pray that she is out of the door before she completes her tax-taking trilogy. If the Chancellor changes nothing, we need to change the Chancellor. But what would the Conservatives do differently, Madam Deputy Speaker? Well, we'd start with a simple truth. Employers create jobs, not ministers, not schemes, not programmes. Employers, private employers, they're the ones that generate the wealth. The ladder of opportunity isn't built by ministerial good intentions. It's built by creating incentives for the behaviours you want. And the behaviour you want from employers is to take the risk, to feel it's worth their while for their family to invest in and give an opportunity to a young person. But under this government, the first rung of the ladder is being sawn off. Young people don't begin at the top. They begin with their Saturday job, their summer shift, their first payslip. That's where confidence is built, habits are formed, and futures are forged. When those jobs disappear, the ladder doesn't get longer, it just gets shorter and steeper. Under a Conservative government, we will abolish business rates for retail, hospitality and leisure. Not 10% of them, 100% of them. The very sectors where so many young people take their first step. Cutting costs give businesses the freedom to grow and hire. And you don't need a vast bureaucratic number of people to administer a scheme when you simply lower the costs for employers. They get on with it. That will create real opportunities for young people to learn, earn and prove themselves. Under Labour, businesses face another 3 years of higher and higher costs, heavier regulation and constant uncertainty, leaving young people blocked, frustrated and struggling to get a foothold in the job market. So that's why we will repeal Labour's job-destroying Employment Rights Act, because you cannot regulate your way to prosperity. That Act introduced 28, count them, major reforms, placing significant new requirements on businesses, £5 billion in costs by the government's own estimate. Perhaps the most damaging to young people is the planned changes to zero-hours contracts, requiring guaranteed hours and compensation for cancelled shifts. While well-intentioned, and I fully accept that, these measures reduce the flexibility that both employers and young people value, so as they can balance their studies with gaining experience. Businesses will hire fewer young workers, leaving a generation without the chance to learn, earn and prove themselves. And if we see the youth unemployment rate continue to go up, as it did under the previous Labour governments, from the 14% inherited from the Conservatives to 20%, I hope the Honourable Lady will say now on the floor of the House that if that were to be the terrible outcome and the scarring impact on young people, she would not seek to stand for the Labour Party, because she would recognise at the next election that she'd failed us. I give way to the Honourable Lady.
And I thank the honourable member for giving way. As an ex-employment lawyer and in fact a partner in a law firm that employed 50 people, an equity partner, so I do have some experience. I remember 1998 when the minimum wage came in for over 18s, the same figure for over 18s, and I remember the Conservative Party changing that. So if you were under 25, you were paid less. Your rent doesn't cost less when you're 24. There is still that differential now for under 21s of £2 an hour. It still exists. So how can you say that that differential is no longer there? Because it still is even now.
The Honourable Lady is quite right to mention what we're talking about here is balance. None of us, we're not talking about total employer free-for-all on the one side. What you're looking at is getting that balance, and it looks as if that balance has gone wrong. The Honourable Lady must know this. She can't be. What have been the great external economic shocks over the last year and a half? They haven't really been there. There's no reason other than the policies of this government that have led to this increase in youth unemployment, the loss of nearly 100,000 jobs in hospitality. It is about getting the balance right, and this government has not done it. What the Conservatives will do is align incentives, cut costs and free businesses to hire. Get the balance right. And in doing so, we will give businesses the freedom to take a chance, give young people the chance to prove themselves, because a Conservative government stands for work, not welfare, for opportunity, not dependency.
Yeah.